started celebrating Bhagavan's Jayanti as a retreat in Tampa in 2013. So excluding years 2020, 2021 and 2022 because of COVID, we started celebrating again from 2023. Therefore, this marks the occasion of the 10th year of the Tampa retreat. This is a time when Bhagavan's children across the American continent come together under a single roof to celebrate Bhagavan and his devotees. During these years, there have been many presentations given on Bhagavan and his devotees. But to the best of my knowledge, there has been only one presentation on a woman devotee given by Amma in 2017. That's on Alagamar. Now, this year, we are lucky to have another presentation on a wonderful set of women devotees of Bhagavan by Dr. Nimmi Bhardwaj. Nimmi does not require introductions. If I were to properly introduce, I need to take 1.5 hours. She's a poet, a historian, a humanitarian, a kind-hearted devotee, a hiker, a runner, and a mother of 3. But did I mention that she's also a pediatrician doing a day job? Above all, she's very instrumental in feeding us during these 3 days. But not only in this retreat, but for the last few retreats as well. So thank you for that. Her spontaneous ability to compose poetry is an amazing gift from Bhagavan. I have benefited reading thousands of her poems over the years. Just a few days ago, she saw a photo of a crow that's pictured in the forefront of Arunachala Hill, and she wrote the following poetry. Embodied, I travel with feathers many. Perched here, there is no boundary between you and me. That is the sort of poem, and that's the sort of quality she writes often. We've been asking her to give a presentation on women devotees for the last few years, and this year she kindly agreed to do so. It's my privilege to introduce Dr. Nimmi Bhardwaj to inspire us with deep research soaked with devotion. Please welcome Nimmi.
Om Namo Bhagavate Shri Ramanaya. My topic for today is women devotees of Bhagavan. Why do we even need to see women devotees in isolation? What's so special? After all, Bhagavan's teaching is all about losing identities. We are supposed to abide in that self that is present in all sentient beings. But we do clamor for stories of women devotees of Bhagavan, animal devotees of Bhagavan, and so on. So, I guess it's because we live in a world of names and forms. And as long as we are living in a world with names and forms, we do feel the limitations and prejudices meted out to names and forms. So, yes, women devotees, their spiritual journey becomes very special because on all spiritual journeys, regardless of whether they are men, women, or an animal, is special because we learn so much, we get inspired. But the women devotees especially teach us some lessons. They are very intriguing because they compel us to think and become a better version of ourselves. Now, to start it off, I want to step back to 1917. This is a picture of Visalakshi. She's the one that's marked with a red arrow. And she's sitting right next to Kavya Kanta Ganapati Muni. She is the wife of Kavya Kanta Ganapati Muni. On August 21st, 1917, she posed a few questions. The questions were about equality of women in renunciation and liberation. These questions were voiced by the Muni to Bhagavan, and Bhagavan gave his answers. So both the questions and the answers are in chaste Sanskrit verses, and they form the 13th chapter of Shri Ramana Gita. Now, the relevance of these questions and answers is going to be felt 5 years later. Let's move on to 1922, May 19th. Azhagammal, Bhagavan's mother, attained Mahanirvana in the hands of Bhagavan. And this happens in Skandashram. They bring the body down to the foothills, and the general consensus is to build a samadhi and put a lingam on top and create a shrine. Now we are in 1922 in one of the most ultra-conservative South Indian temple town. There is no way we can easily convince the temple authorities that it's going to be okay to do all this. So we needed some good debating team, and we had that. The temple authorities needed a lot of convincing because do Shastras even allow this? Can we build a shrine for a female sannyasi? It's never been done before. And then we have a small retinue of scholars all on our side, headed by Kavya Kanta Ganapati Muni, marching towards them. And I believe that this verse clinched the debate for us. I could read from there, but I need my glasses, so I'm going to read from here. Muktatvasya vishishtatvad bodhasya chavadurapi jivan mukta nadahyasya taddeho hi suralayaha. So, what it says is, this is Bhagavan's answer to Visalakshi's question. As there is no distinction in liberation and knowledge, a woman who is liberated when alive should not be consigned to flames. Her body is verily a temple of God. So, we could say that this chapter laid the foundation stone of Mother Samadhi and thereby the foundation stone for Shri Ramana that we love and enjoy today. So Bhagavan, in a way, blessed this project way back in 1970. Now, with the blessings of these two, I'm going to proceed with the three devotees that I want to present today. The first one is Akhilandamma. She is also known as Desuramma because she was born in a village called Desu. It is very common to call people from the place where they came from because that was the tradition at that time, right? So she was born in 1871, about a decade older than Bhagavan, almost a decade older than. So She was about 5 years old and she was given off in marriage. Again, that's part of the tradition. And then 3 years later, before she could understand what it is to be married, she was already widowed. Her husband had passed away, so here is the 8-year-old still at home with her parents and is widowed. It's one thing to not marry or have an opportunity at education, but the culture was such that she had to carry the scars of this personal tragedy all through her life. So it's one thing for her to know that she doesn't have a husband, but she had to physically show that evidence day in and day out from that early childhood. So she followed her mother. So from that day onwards, all she did was serve her family, serve the neighbors, and whatever it is, whatever you do to keep yourself occupied. And then this moves on, the commonest path that they could honestly take in order to be safe in society is to serve mendicants and sadhus. So she took over making flower gardens in the local temple and then serving sadhus and mendicants who came by. And their family was also very devoted to sadhus, and so she followed that path. This is a path of safety for most women at that time. And then, so we saw Desur is a village. Now, the Bhagavan's grace comes in this next one. So she is about 40 miles from this bustling town called Tiruvannamalai. This is a picture of Tiruvannamalai Deepam in 1880. So this was a very busy town, drawing in crowd from all over that local South Indian state, even then. So she lived about 40 miles northeast of that. So it's very likely that from her early childhood, she was going to Tiruvannamalai for the Deepam festival at least once a year. So that is where her spiritual path becomes very interesting and becomes very inspiring. Now, who does she get to meet? So, 1896 would have been just another year when she would have also gone to Tiruvannamalai when Deepam was happening. Very likely she saw Bhagavan in the temple premises, but Bhagavan was in deep samadhi. He was then called Brahmana Swami, and he was in deep samadhi. He was not talking to anybody, and so technically you couldn't call it darshan. Darshan is it's a two-way communication. It doesn't have to have words in it, but the person who is seeing and the person who is seen are both part of that conversation. So ideally her first darshan happened in 1903. By this time Akhilandamal is 32 years old, and she is she is quite independent. She comes to the town very frequently, and she's picking flowers on the foothills of the hill, and she sees a bunch of people walking up the hill. She's like, what are you guys doing? Where are you going? Who are you going to meet? Oh, there is a Swamiji up the hill. Just staying in his presence makes us all so calm. We go there. So she becomes very curious. So what is he called? Oh, he's called a Brahmana Swami. That's the first thing. She's like, oh, it's a Brahmana Swami. And will he actually accept anything from me? So these are all the prejudices that she has faced all her life. So she wants to play it safe. She goes buys some sugar candy, takes it up to the hill, and there she sees Bhagavan for the first time. And Bhagavan is there. Uddandi Nayanar, his attendant, he is also there. He receives it on his behalf. Bhagavan takes one sugar candy, and then Uddandi Nayanar takes the rest and he distributes it to the rest of the crowd. and then gives a few back to her. She's never had such a pleasant transaction happen in her life. And she realizes that something is different about this Bhagavan, this sadhu that she is seeing just then. A few days later, she brings some fruits. And the same thing happens. And then she becomes a little more brave. She brings milk. She boils milk and brings. Will this Brahmana Swami actually drink milk that I'm bringing in? And he did. She is ecstatic. Suddenly she realized, oh my God, this Swami does not have any prejudice that usually all these high caste people have. She's overjoyed, and that sets her on the path of the food service. 1903, the food service starts. Why did I put a bullock cart? Because I think a lot of people wouldn't have seen it. So, Day2 is 40 miles away from Tiruvannamalai. Most of the days she has actually walked down to Tiruvannamalai, but sometimes when she's coming for extended period of times, she would engage a bullock cart and put all the provisions there and come and cook on open fire and bring food to the folks in Virupaksha cave. She did this continuously, like every time she comes, she'll stay for 3 or 4 months and provide food and go back, collect some more and come back. Now, while this was going on, this entire, 1903 through 1907, I think, HML party comes. So there are more women coming in to serve Bhagavan and the sadhus in Virupaksha. So 1907, HML party joins the gang. 1909, Mudaliar party joins the gang and her daughter-in-law. So there are a bunch of women taking care of Bhagavan and the sadhus there. And also Seshadri Swamigal and some more sadhus in Tiruvannamalai. So the food scene was getting better and better. So Bhagavan gives her a next avenue of service. Mastan Swami, also from the same village, a few years younger than Desuramma or Kilandamma. He is a Muslim mystic, like a Sufi kind of follower, and he is supposed to be a weaver by profession, but he never took to it that well, and he mostly led a nomadic life with severe austerity. So Akhilandamma had a few conversations with him, and something stuck out to her. She thought that Mastan Swami will truly benefit from meeting Bhagavan. So in 1914, she brought him along. They walked that 40 miles together, and he came to see Bhagavan for the first time. And most of you all would be aware, Mastan Swami is one of the more advanced devotees, and Bhagavan himself declared that he was so right that he needed very little pushing towards the realization. And on the very first visit, he had a very deep spiritual experience. Now, Mastan Swami and Akhilandamma pooled all their resources and decided that they are going to serve him in a much better way by doing this. The very first Ramana Center. This is way back in 1914. I think the date is actually May 22nd, 1914. The two of them pooled their resources. Not just resources, the thing is, they also set a plan. She had inherited, so she must have been in her 40s, so she got some family inheritance and all that. So she designated some of the farmlands profit to support, so that it was not like a one-time venture, taking donations and doing it. They made sure something like a trust was formed, so that this is going to be an ongoing service. The Ramana Center is going to serve a lot of people, a lot of devotees are going to go there. Now, that brought out another aspect of this of Akilandamma, which I really, really admire. She's illiterate, she never got to go to school, but she learned from the local women, local folks, all the remedies, the herbs and good plants that are around her. And she pretty much doctored and nursed a lot of people. So all that happened in this Ramana center. Some of the famous devotees, some of the more popular, well-known devotees, I wouldn't say famous, they are well-known because people have written about them. Ramanatha Brahmachari, Ramaswami Pillai, I think Kunjaswami, so many of these devotees, when they were sick, they went there and she gave them their herbal remedies and they got better. In fact, Bhagavan used to say, if somebody was not looking right, say, you need to go to Desur and get better. No? So that was the amount of confidence he had in her ability to nurse people back to health. So from exclusive food service, she has moved on to providing lodging, boarding for anybody that is on any pilgrimage and some amount of medical care. So, when he was in Virupaksha, there was one incident I wanted to say. So these are all marginalized women, and as they grow older, say when they are younger, they have nieces and nephews that they can feed and feel kind of connected and feel wanted. Now, they'll come to a phase where all the folks that she took care of, like her brother's kids and all, they all had their own family. So suddenly, she has no purpose in life, and they get truly marginalized in society and in the family. Now, one incident happened which really struck out. So she was serving food for Bhagavan on the hill. I think this was in Skandashram base, and his friend, the Nodi, these guys know him better now. The monkey, the limping monkey, he used to come and have food with him, and he demanded equal treatment as Bhagavan. So when she was serving food on Bhagavan's plate, he kept taking the food. And so every time he took some food, she would serve some more. And the monkey got really upset and he growled at her. And Bhagavan said, "Don't growl, she's one of us." I think that stuck with her. Now, my entire information is coming from a biography done by Sadhu Om. And he did this biography, this interview, when she was 90 years old. So for her to remember something that happened in her 40s, the impact of Bhagavan saying, she's one of mine, is something. For us to go and say, this is my guru, is normal. But for the guru to turn around and acknowledge and say, you know what? Don't mess with her, she's mine. That is a big deal. And for something like that to happen, steepens anybody's spiritual progress. And I think it did for Akilandamma. Because she describes the 20s and 30s as the golden years of her life. Now, I don't have a black and white picture, and I wonder why I put this picture. Now, this is the only convincing picture I have of the 7 springs on Arunachala Hill. And that person is actually pointing to one of the springs. Okay, why is that picture there? The 20s, like I said, was very important for, 20s and 30s were very important for Akilandamma because she got to move very closely with Bhagavan. They went on many Giri Pradakshinas, walking around the hill. And there was one time when they all decided that they're going to walk, they're going to summit the Arunachala. She was probably in her early 50s. And Bhagavan came all the way up to the 7 springs and he said, you guys, you young ones, go summit. I'm going to stay here. I've had a good meal. I'm going to just rest here. You all finish and come back. And he was there. And Mastan Swami was also sitting right next to him. So this little crowd that wanted to summit went up. And Akhilandama was probably a little old by then, and she couldn't keep up with the pace and got lost. She started panicking. Oh my God, I've lost my way and I can't see anybody around. But then she hears, Desurama, Desurama. And she's like, who is screaming? So she just followed that Desurama call and came right back to Seven Springs. So what had happened was, Bhagavan had noticed that all the folks that left with her to summit have come back, and she had not. So he had sent out a search party to find her. And I would like to be lost, to be found like that. I'm sure she also did. And so it was a very endearing experience. The personal love that Bhagavan showed to her was very, very heartfelt. Now, Kavya Kanta Ganapati Muni had special love for Akhilandama. This segment is only in the Telugu version of her biography, which was recorded by somebody called Nageshwar Rao. Okay. He says every time Kavikanta saw Akhilandama, he used to call her, Akhilandama is here, Akhilandama is here. And she used to feel like, gosh, he's such a scholar. I'm such an illiterate villager bee. But he still calls me as if I'm his equal. So she went up and said, you know, you guys are all so scholarly. You ask such good questions. You all have such good spiritual knowledge. Here I am. I know nothing. What chance do I have at liberation? And you always look at me as if I'm your equal. And he said, what do you mean? You are serving Bhagavan, who is the embodiment of Shiva. What more would you have to do? You are saved, your entire clan is saved, and I know that for a fact, and you better believe it. He says that. She wants to believe it, but she keeps whining about how her life is not treating her well. Bhagavan comes and he's looking at her and he says, what's going on? Why are you so sad? She says, you know, I feel so isolated from life and nobody takes care of me. And then Bhagavan says, don't worry. I was 16 when I came here. The goodness of the people took care of me. So why are you so worried about yourself? Then she says, but you are a realized soul. I'm a nobody. And Bhagavan, for a moment, looks at her really firmly and says, listen, anytime you are feeling this way, when you feel destitute, just remember, all you have to say is Ramana. He didn't. She couldn't understand why he was saying that, but years later, like when Bhagavan's Mahanirvana had happened, she says in her biography that there have been many times when I felt absolutely destitute. And those times, in those dire times, all I had to say was, oh Bhagavan, and I felt good. So the power of that conviction comes from that singular contact with Bhagavan and that one word at the right time. Then in the later years, once she was in her 60s, I think she wanted to really adopt the life of a sannyasi, and she tried in many cunning ways to get Bhagavan to accept that, and he did. And she started wearing the orange robes. I'm not going to go into the details of that. Then one day she was wearing those orange robes, and Bhagavan had just had his tonsure and he was coming down the hill, and somebody had told, oh, you need to get an Upadesa now. And what is an Upadesa? Is a direct personal teaching given by a guru to a person. So she went and very bashfully, she knows Bhagavan does not, typically do all this. And she's also very bashful because she's wearing those orange robes, which are not actually Bhagavan's idea. So anyway, she goes there and says, Bhagavan, I need Upadesa. And he chuckles. What? You need Upadesa? And then he looks at her and he finds out that she's pretty serious about it. And then he looks at her and says, Ni unnai vidamal iru, which means never let go of your self, the inner self. Again, she said, I did not understand what he was saying. It took me years and years and years. Just the voice of him saying that is so deep, and I believe I have to just believe that that is the teaching and it will deliver me. This is what she felt all through her life. Now, she lived a good life. She lived well into her 90s, and in the early 90s, I think she, about a year after the biography interview was done, she passed away very peacefully in the Desur Matalayam. And Sadhu, who wrote the biography, says, in his foreword, he says, the entire life of Akhilandamma, the spiritual content of her life, is completely depicted in this Devi Kalotram's verse. I think it is verse 83. I don't have it on my slide. So it is 83, I think. Okay. So it says, if Arinyane Kande Isai Karanam Moondranum Sevviya Gandam Kani Pu Theen Pugayum Divyama Neeradal Adai Oon Ninjurugum Anbal Indare Aradithiduvar Piravi Saramal. I tried to break it to make it clear. I think I made it worse. But this is the English translation, and thanks to Hari. So, earnest seekers who, with the enlightened one, who see the enlightened one and worship him with all three instruments, namely the mind, body, and speech, in unison, offering him with heart-melting love, sweet-smelling sandalwood paste, fruits, flowers, incense, clothes, water to bathe, and food to eat, will thus attain liberation. So that is her story, and this is her Samadhi shrine in Desur. It is still there, and the room right next to it is where she used to cook food. There is one particular instance where she made some snacks. I'm going to let it pass. They are all there in many documented memories of people. Okay, moving on. Are we doing good time? You're okay? All right.
One question. Sorry.
Yes.
Are questions allowed in this session?
You can, but we have to keep the time too.
Very quickly, what I can't read from the distance. What does the Tamil word say in that room?
Oh, Ramanarku murukku seida idam. She made snacks for it. That's why I said I wanted to skip this. We can get to it if we get the time. But that's an interesting one. Okay, our next devotee. So T.R. Kanakamal. You all know her as T.R. Kanakamal. I was pleasantly surprised that T actually is not Tiruvannamalai. It is actually Thisayanur. And Thisayanur is the native place of Ranganatha, her father. And T.R. Kanakamal was born the year our ashram came. I mean, not exactly in the same month, but she was born in 1922. It's an easy way to remember. She's actually a second generation Bhagavan devotee. What do I mean by that? Her dad, Ranganatha Iyer, and his brother, Ramakrishna Iyer, both of them were ardent devotees of Bhagavan, even from the early Virupaksha days. Now, this picture is important because there's a little digression here. Ramakrishna Iyer is the uncle of T.R. Kanakama. He was the village munsif when the samadhi was being built, like the day when Aragamal passed away and the samadhi was going to be. He was the village munsif. He came by and he said, guys, if you're planning to do a samadhi, why don't you go away from the road a good bit, so that in the future, if you happen to build a temple, you will have a good egress. So, Ramakrishna, it all happened through their foresight too. Now, Ramakrishna Iyer is also the one who was a strong ally of Niranjanananda Swami. This small piece of land was donated by Babaji Ashram, and within a few years there was a conflict, and he was able to help Niranjanananda Swami. In fact, he was a very strong ally and helped in a lot of little legal disputes that Niranjanananda Swami faced. Now, how is it relevant? His wife, Ponnamal, was a Shakti devotee. They are householders. They have a son, but Ponnamal led a very austere life. In the later years, Kanakamal actually says her aunt's spiritual independence was a very inspiring thing for her growing up. Okay, so let's move on to actual Kanakamal story. Okay. Now, Kanakamal, as her parents were already devoted, so she grew up listening to conversations between her dad and her uncle about Bhagwan's teaching, and they, because of in around 1918, Ranganatha Iyer set up a factory in Kurnool, about 500 kilometers from Tiruvannamalai. So she did not live in Tiruvannamalai that much at that time. But she used to travel frequently to her uncle's house, many times during a year. She remembers the first vivid memory of hers with seeing Bhagwan was actually at age 8. So she says that smile of Bhagwan kept her spellbound. It literally did that, because there is very little conversation that ever happened between Bhagwan and Kanakamal. So 1930 is when she saw him. And then they continued, she continued coming back and forth. And when she was about 11 years old, there was a school project where she was asked to research about Ramakrishna Paramahamsa and Vivekananda. So, stark difference from Akhilandamal's life. Here is a lady who is getting a good education, who's allowed to have some freedom in what she wants to learn and all that. So when she researched Paramahamsa and Vivekananda, that initial spark of spirituality got really lit well. She thought, wow, this is a good life, to be dedicated to a cause like this, to find true purpose in life. And she's 11, and the very next year, 1934, she turns 12, and it's not moving. Moved. Okay. So she's 12 years old, and she is on a visit to Tiruvannamalai, and she hears her parents already planning her marriage. She fought tooth and nail. She said, no, I don't want to get married. This is not something that I really want to do. And she is, her father is very, very progressive in that sense. He says, well, we will go ahead with the marriage, but there is a time when you actually have to leave the house and go to the in-laws. Between now and then, if you change your mind, I will not hold you to this marriage. I will let you stay in the house. And she accepted that condition, and she went forth with her marriage. But when the time came, when she was 16 years old and when she was expected to go to her in-laws' place, she just did not want to do it. And that's when the strife came. Parents did not want her to stay home, and they were worried that this would only be a phase, and by the time she gets out of this spiritual fever, she'll be too old to get to proceed with marital life. But that did not happen. She stuck to it, and her routine was, she was still reading a lot of spiritual books, and she was meditating, and she did not want to be involved in the world as much. So she got to go to Ramanashram quite a few times, and every time she went, she would plead to Bhagavan, why is it that I have to go back? Why is it that I have to go back? And not in a very vocal way. She would, as soon as she sees Bhagavan, all her thoughts will just melt away. And one time in early 1946, she had a dream, and Bhagavan came in her dream and assured her that he has accepted that immense love that she has for him. She woke up from that, and she was in a state of trance. Nothing truly mattered. She couldn't pay attention to what was going on around her. And the parents realized by that time that there is no coming back for this person. She is truly devoted to Bhagavan, and there is no way they are going to somehow keep her in their house. So in 1946, she finally got the permission from her parents to come to Tiruvannamalai and settle down. Initially, she settled down in her aunt's house, but it was in the outskirts, and she wanted to be fully engaged in the ashrams, morning Veda Parayanam and all that. She wanted to listen to all that, and that would mean that she would walk in the dark. Because it was not practical, she moved to a small room in Ramananagar. There are a lot of difficulties she would have faced. She does not overtly have any signs of personal tragedy. She is not wearing any clothes that would say that she has lost her husband or anything, because she did not lose her husband. She just did not want to stay in the married life. So here's a young woman, 24 years old, living by herself. So it's not easy to be by yourself and not invite attention. So she never spoke to, she was very reticent by nature, and that, I believe, is the grace of Bhagavan, because that protection, that silence, and that ability to not converse freely protected her from becoming very gregarious, because that would have meant being pulled back to her family, because they would have gotten very, very upset even if they hear one story that she was talking too much to somebody or talking inappropriately. So all that helped her, that being very quiet and just being by herself in Bhagavan's presence, in silence, was a total protection for her to just soak in Bhagavan's presence. And that she did. These are the times when, the hall, it was not an old hall, that was the only hall. That hall was filling up really fast, and Bhagavan's Advent Golden Jubilee was being celebrated that year. So they had built the Jubilee Hall, which is outside the hall. And so there was complete free access to animals and people, everybody, and Bhagavan was in full, he was in full view all the time. And she got to enjoy that, and she quickly absorbed all that was going on around her, around Bhagavan. And in her cherished memory, she quotes so many interesting incidents. There's one where, because Bhagavan was out in the open, and it was pretty cold around November, Manavasi Ramaswamy had brought him a shirt. And Bhagavan looked at him and he said, I'm already wearing 5 shirts. You want me to wear a 6th shirt? And so stuff like that. I mean, she saw certain incidents, and the ones that she quote are very, very transportive, very much like Suryanarama's too. And this is where, in one of the instances, I think may have it, I don't know. The white peacock comes into the, it gets gifted around this time, so I don't know. The next picture is that. Yeah. So the white peacock comes, and then there is the instance where there is a column, the drawing on the floor, and the peacock is watching it, and Bhagavan says people who have that amount of concentration should be able to do self-inquiry very, very easily. And let me get back. Yeah. So from this point, she also saw between 40, her time frame when she was there was between 46 and 50. She had some personal issues to overcome. Young female, that was the reason. I was wondering why I had that slide. So here, when she saw people coming in and making offerings constantly, she had this urge, oh my God, I have to do something too. So she goes home. She's living in a very limited area, the place to cook and the vessels to cook were very limited. But she just went and borrowed some vessels and got some cashews and roasted them and brought it to Bhagavan. Bhagavan looked at it, and typically he would have, she has always seen Bhagavan taking at least one and then everything getting distributed. But he didn't do it. He didn't take even one. And he just called the attendant and said, take it to the kitchen. And she was heartbroken. She's like, oh my God, did I do something wrong? Was it not good? Was it what? So she was haunted. So the entire day, like typically she would have enjoyed the bliss of Bhagavan. Instead, that evening, that night, she spent haunted with that one thought. What did I do wrong? Why did Bhagavan not take mine? Mine. And then the next day she goes, and Bhagavan is looking at her, and then he looks at that and, did you tell her that we used the cashew around breakfast today? And then she becomes quiet. But she goes home, she realizes that she missed out on a whole day because all she could think of was, I made this, and Bhagavan didn't take it. So it was a lesson for her to not be so heavily invested in this doership. And then this is going to get a second chapter very soon, because she's going to meet somebody who is going to really drive that point in. Okay. I'll get to it in just a moment. So she got to witness the consecration of the shrine and also the Darshana Hall. The Darshana Hall had a lot of history with Kanakamal because she always chose to sit in only one spot. And there is a picture of her in her, after the Mahanirvana, with sitting on a chair to just depict that. So during the last year, the last 18 months, she saw the rapid deterioration of Bhagavan's physical body. And she was absolutely devastated by that. At the same time, she also learned a lot about what exactly survives beyond death. And that kept reiterating in her mind that it is only the ego that is born and the ego that dies. And she kept that feeling of connection with the spirit because she did not leave after the Mahanirvana. So the reason this picture is there is TPR. TPR and Sub-Registrar Narayana, they were all like the nighttime gods of Bhagavan in the Darshana hall days. And they all used to come back and tell her stories about what happened during the night. And that satsanga, she relates to all those times that made her feel like the body as such is not so important as much as the teaching. So the Mahanirvana happens, and this is a very reticent, bashful devotee who has not spoken much until then. And then after the Mahanirvana comes a big change in her life. She comes in close contact with Muruganar. Muruganar, for some reason, God for some reason brought Muruganar and Kanakammal together because Kanakammal was the perfect student. She listened and grasped. She was like a sponge, learned the language from him, and through his poetry developed such deep devotion, and was able to transmit that devotion for many generations that's come out after that. So in Muruganar's presence, right after the Mahanirvana, everybody was leaving, and she, along with Anandamal, Kunjaswami, they requested Muruganar to give a discourse on the collected works. And she learnt it at his feet and internalized it to the point where at a later time she was able to verbatim produce Muruganar's teaching, Muruganar's commentary completely. Now, the next person is the Anandamal. I told you there is a chapter 2 in that ego trip that she had. Anandamal played a very important role in molding her sadhana. And I am amazed how Bhagavan gives Mastan Swami for Akhilandamma so that she goes beyond the cooking and goes into deep sadhana through the spiritual companionship of Mastan. Here we have Anandamal, who was a householder, had a child, and still stayed in the path of vichara and severe austerity. Anandamal was living very close to Kanakammal. Remember that story where she made that cashew nut and came back and had a restless, sleepless night, and she herself realized that doership was the reason why she went through such severe mental anguish. Not to just in a few more weeks, she repeated it. She wanted to make some snacks for the folks in Palakuttu, the sadhus in Palakuttu, which included Muruganar too. And she made that and gave it to them, and then took some to Anandamal. Anandamal looked at her and said, "Why would you waste your time like this? Of all the places, Tiruvannamalai is the place where Parvati came and did penance. So I do believe that women who do penance here have the highest chance of salvation. And you're just wasting away all that time feeding sadhus. They don't need pakoras. Did they come and ask you for pakoras? They didn't. Why are you wasting your time like this?" So it was a true slap on her face, and it really jolted her sadhana to the point where she said, okay, what she's saying is correct. And not only then, later on, there is a tribute that Mary Turner pays to Kanakammal. And in that, she says, I used to be drawn to ritualistic stuff, and I'll spend a lot of time watching rituals. And Kanakamal said, don't fritter your time like this. You came here for vichara, do the vichara. So, see how it transcends. It's really, really amazing how if one woman is educated in one particular thing, they will make sure that everybody that they come in contact gets that information, and they're going to put forth that thought into them too. So, Anandamal did play a very important role in her. Now, Anandamal, Muruganar, Kunjaswami, Kanakamal, they were all in that group where, Muruganar would give ecstatic discourse about Bhagavan, about other words. So, there was one moment when Anandamal was having a question. She was just looking at Muruganar and saying, did Vamadeva, one person in that discussion was this particular person called Vamadeva. She said, did Vamadeva get this whole experience of becoming born again just because of some small karma that he had to enter the womb? And was he already a realized soul when he was inside the womb? This is the question she is asking Muruganar. And even before Muruganar could answer, she just slumped down, and everybody thought she had just fallen at his feet. And only in a few minutes they realized that that was the last question, that was the last thought, and she had passed away. So Kanakamal witnessed this when she was in her 40s. And anybody who's read that cherished memory, you can feel her heart beating faster when she is writing about this, because she was completely floored by that experience. She did not, how can somebody have such a release from life? And what an elevated soul. So she was so awestruck by that passing away. And she never missed a moment when she could talk about it. Then Muruganar discourses happen. Muruganar passes away. Then the 80s happen. And in the 80s, people are now coming to Kanakamal. Oh, you know Muruganar. You have to tell us all about Muruganar now. And she gets to, everybody tells her about the discourses that you listen. You need to start giving us the discourses. And that was the next legacy. She starts speaking about Bhagavan's complete works, starts in the small room, and then it becomes very popular. And I believe quite a few people from here have actually listened to her. And the number of people, non-Tamil speaking people, were growing. So we had people who were giving instant translation to whatever she was saying. So that was how popular her discourses were. So from being a quiet person, unable to even talk in front of Bhagavan, she became her master's voice. She was talking non-stop about Bhagavan and Muruganar. That was the next legacy. I mean, that was and she was very endearing. Everybody thought that they were the favorite child of Kanakamal. That was how loving she was. She also came to Arunachala Ashrama one time. She traveled all the way here because I think her nephew, somebody lives in the northeast, and she participated in a function in Arunachala Ashrama, and there are some recordings of her chanting Arunachala Stuti Panchakam. Now, in the mid-90s, that happened in the early 90s. In the mid-90s, she started having some health setbacks. There was a burning stove, And I think, from reading it, it looks like what she had was a transient, ischemic attack. Like the blood just doesn't go to your brain for a second, and you just faint. And that's a preliminary event which happens before a stroke. So there was a burning stove, and she fell on it, and so she had to be rushed to the hospital. And because that's always that event is always a harbinger of a stroke, she ended up having a stroke, and she was in the ICU. She couldn't talk, she couldn't move her limb, and she was panicking because she was alone in the ICU. None of her relatives are there, and she's trying to scream, but no words are coming out. And out of sheer frustration, she says, "Oh my God, there's nobody to help me. I'm here, I can't move my limb, and there's just nobody to help me." And then the inner voice comes in and says, "This is where you lose your trust in your body, and this is where you detach yourself." So she had a near-death experience from what I read. And she abided in herself, and she said calmly, she started thinking of Bhagavan's teaching and said, "Okay, this body is going to fail me, people are going to fail me, everything is going, this body does not belong to me. I am just going to internalize and abide in the self." And she did that. And the next day, she completely recovered. This truly happened. And the doctor comes in, and he could not explain how she got the limb back, how her speech came back. So this really did happen. And then, of course, she did not just go from not talking to talking 10 sentences in one minute. She did have to go through a lot of physiotherapy and all that, but she recovered a good bit. But her health was weak, so she stayed in Chennai, and she made frequent trips to Thiruvannamalai from then on. Then she would always come for main functions like Jayanti and Deepam. In 2009, she came for the Deepam. Typically, she would have gone back and come back for Jayanti. But for some reason, she said, "I'm here, I don't feel like I have the energy to go back to Chennai and come back for Deepam, so I'm just going to stay." And she did. And on Jayanti day, so I wanted to show this picture. This is that's the Darshana hall she loves. And this is where she used to always sit. It's in the back part of the Darshana hall. She's facing the stone sofa. Now, we are on January 1st, 2010. So she had come for 2009 Deepam. She stayed over, and it was Jayanti day. She came. The Veda Parayanam had just finished, and she was holding on to those railings and standing there, looking at Bhagavan's Samadhi. She was holding on, but she was still very unstable, and she dropped down, and everybody, there were a lot of people, it's Bhagavan Jayanti, the whole place is crowded. They all noticed that this elegantly dressed lady was holding on to the railing and standing 1 minute, and the next minute she had slumped down. Everybody thought she was just doing pranams, but she did not get up. And then quickly people realized that something has happened, and they took her out, and long story short, whatever happened to Anandamma, 10 times more sacred in the presence of her Guru's Samadhi, she passed on. And I don't think that can be a greater release from life for somebody like her. And that's my second devotee. And can we move on to the third one? Yeah. Now, my third devotee is a very fascinating person. Her name is Ella Kinney my art. The two that we saw earlier had personal tragedies, had prejudices meted around, so many things. You can say so many sob stories that made them want to be spiritual. Ella was not in any of those situations technically. She was born in 1903 in a free country, and she was born to her father, who was a fur trader. Fur trade in Switzerland in 1903 is much like having an ice cream factory in Tampa. You will never go out of business. So she was born in a very rich family, and her mother was Danish, very independent, free-spirited lady who said, everybody should have good opportunities with education. She should be independent. She should have whatever she wants to do. She should have access to that knowledge. So she lived a very exclusive lifestyle. She learned to ski. She learned to sail. And by the time she was 16, she was a good sailor. She was a prolific skier, and at age 16, she found the first female field hockey team for Switzerland. And this is her. By the time she was in the 20s, so she was born in 1903. By the time she was 21, she had sailed. I don't know much about sailing, but I found that this is very hard. She sailed from Cannes to Corsica in a single-mast sailboat. Apparently, it's very hard to maneuver a single-mast sailboat, but she did that with a friend, and they also planned to do a longer trip, except that the friend had some personal issues, and so she couldn't join her. That was her sailing, that was the beginning of her sailing career. What she did was, in 1924, in the Summer Olympics, she was the only female contestant in the sailing competition. And they did not have females participating in sailing, so she had to participate with a bunch of guys. There were 16 people in that competition, and she came 11th, so that's a big deal. Okay, so she's an Olympian, sailed in some serious Mediterranean Sea, found a hockey team, so very well accomplished athlete. And we are just crossing that First World War phase. So she is in her 20s, she's already seen the First World War. Europe has gone through the First World War, and some amount of that second industrialization has happened. Now, we are moving on to the 1930s. Her sports career has reached the pinnacle. She dabbed with doing sports reporting. She had enough of that. And then she said, I can't sit at a desk and work. I'm not cut out for that. So what do? And then found this traveling. She wanted to combine traveling. She was not very good at writing initially. So she had to make a career out of it, and she said, okay, if somebody would sponsor me to travel, I will write down all the travel stories to all these far places that people don't typically go to. So that's how she started. She boarded a ship to Russia, and she went down the back roads, and she went into Turkestan, tried to explore smaller villages and write a travel story just to establish a career. So her first book came out. It was Turkestan Solo, and people accepted her as a travel writer. Then that continued. So, I can travel and write and make a living, let me continue. So she did this all through the 1930s. She started traveling. She was good at taking photographs, so she had a camera with her, and she started taking pictures. And in one of the travels, she got to travel with Peter Fleming, the Ian Fleming's brother. Ian Fleming is the Bond, the character's author. Yeah. So with Peter Fleming, she actually went through the Japan occupied China, and she reported about the Manchurian situation. And her book called The Forbidden Journey, that was the first big bestseller for her. And that really established her as a travel writer. Now, this is around 1936. She's traveling and traveling and traveling, because by this time, she has lost hope in Europe. All she saw was people are clamoring for money, and there is so much of colonial pillage. This is how she writes. This is all that's happening in Europe. They've got it wrong. I need to get away. That's how she started getting out. She meets a lot of people. She meets monks, she meets mystics, she meets scientists, paleontologists, and most of them are famous. I cannot list all of them, but there was one person who wrote a letter to her that truly jolted her. This was Pierre Chagrin. Pierre Chagrin is he's a priest, he's a scientist, and he's also a mystic. And he wrote to her. He said, the end of science is to show there is movement and there is constancy. And you've seen it. You see it through travel, and you've done enough traveling. Now you need to know why you travel and what is it that you're seeking. That was a very dear letter that he wrote to her. She took that to heart. And she said, yes, I have this restlessness. I do know that I'm seeking something, but I do not know what. And that is how her last journey happened. Now that's my very favorite quote. I put it up there because this is my one chance to show it. And so I told you that that letter she received was in 1936. And between 36 and 39, she did a lot of introspection. She tried to help a friend overcome drug addiction through travel. So she thought, if I make this travel thing not just so much about work, but actually have a purpose, maybe it will make me feel better. Maybe that's my calling. So she takes a friend who is addicted to hard drugs, and okay, I am going to take you on a trip so that we will distract you to the point where you get out of this addiction. So it was like a rehab journey. It helped for a little bit, but after 2 years, she knew that was not something that she could do alone, and they split ways. That's when she realized helping and fixing others' problem is not her calling. And so she wanted to find out why she was traveling, and she kept traveling even further. Now, at this point, the Second World War is about to start. Now, this is the tragedy that she faced. She said, World War I happened. Nobody learned anything from it. And now they're talking about this next war, which is going to be the end of all wars. And she said, there's got to be something better than this. All the land and sea travel that she did, she said, I have to find a better, higher purpose in life than these warring nations. And that's when she reached India. That was the first time she came to India in 1940 in the summer. And it was convenient that she reached India because the war had broken out and India was a safe haven for her. So she quickly did some documentary and all that to project to people and earn some money so that she could stay in India for at least an extended period of time. in this period, around 1939, just before she came to India, she met Carl Jung, the famous psychoanalyst. And between 36 and 39, like I said, she had done a lot of introspection. So when Carl Jung asked her a question, Ella, why do you travel so much? She didn't have to think too much. She said, I'm traveling to find a place where I can live peacefully. So she had made a transition from traveling for the travel part of it to a purpose already. Now, in India, once she came to India, like most people, she went to Pondicherry first, and she spent a couple of days there. And there she wrote a letter to her mom, and that's published in her memoirs. She said, my idea of getting to peace did not happen here. I have read Paul Brunton's book. I am going to give that Swami a try. And that's how she ended up coming to திருவண்ணாமலை. That was her, right? Now, this is not a lady with personal tragedy of physical nature. She already was deeply conflicted spiritually. And she knew that she did not have the answers, but she had some significant questions. As soon as she started driving towards Arunachala, she said, I've exhausted all my options. You know, they said that I'll get answers in Pondicherry. I did not. And now I'm heading to another one. Am I going to be running from pillar to post? Am I ever going to get the answers? So she was quite desperate. So the stuff that I'm going to read out is actually her own words, but this never got published. Now, she says, give me, so she's looking at Arunachala and she's saying, give me something really satisfying, no longer disappointing. Humility, since I still am in the material plane. Can I find direction? Because I don't know what to do with my life. I give up writing, book, money, fame, because none of them bring happiness. This was her prayer even before she has set her eyes on Bhagavan. Okay, so she came with utter sincerity and honesty. And you know, Bhagavan always notices that very quickly. So, so moving.
Supposed to be unmoving.
There you go. Unmoving, right? Yeah. Okay. Let's all take this one picture. We are the first female photographer of Bhagavan. Okay? I think that itself is a big deal. Just that is a big deal. And this picture is magical. I think he gave this smile only to Ella. Okay? So, until I read this article by Michael Heidberger and Maharshi, I didn't even know that there was a female photographer that had taken photographs of not just Bhagavan. We are going to see some exquisite photographs. Okay, so here comes Ella in 1940 in November to the ashram. She is dressed in trousers. She has the confidence of a seasoned traveler. She's very sincere. She's got the sincerity of an earnest seeker. And she also has this ability to get along with people and question and mingle and get information very quickly. So because she has traveled so much, she fell into a very quick routine. She came here, she rented a house close to the temple and started coming to the ashram twice a day. She will come to the ashram, spend 2 hours in the morning in the hall. It was still, it is, you could call it the old hall because the Darshana hall was getting built. I'm going to say old hall so that we'll all understand. So she'll spend 2 hours in the old hall in front of Bhagavan, and then go have lunch with him, and then come back again to for 2 hours in the afternoon. This was like a set routine. And she continued, because she had this discipline of writing, she chose places wherever she could sit down and collect her thoughts. Now, did I say that? Yeah. So she was looking at Bhagavan's face, and there were a lot of books around him. There were a lot of works that were already published that she could read, but she constantly said that just looking at him was the best way for her to get to understand what he was trying to say. So these are her exact words when she wrote about her first darshan. I have to back up a little bit and tell you what is different about Ella. Even though she was an author and writer, 90% of all that she wrote while she was in the ashram was never to be published. Most of this information that we are getting now are all from the unpublished manuscripts that is still held in a museum in Geneva. So this most of the quotes are all published now, but they were all not published by her. Okay, so she looked at his eyes and said, his eyes opened the valves of the heart, and she could feel for the first time the peace that she was lacking. She knew right away that she was at the exact same point where she needed to be to get her answers. Okay? My call to reality, represented by this man, was so intense that I knew the answer I was looking for was to be found only in his surroundings. The purpose of my expedition was to bring me to the brink of knowledge that gives meaning to life. Only the inner journey is real. This did not happen. This writing did not happen overnight. She steeped in his presence. She was there, and she had to learn so many new things. She had some preconceived ideas. She thought that a sage would come, he will give discourses. Did not happen. He will come only for a few minutes and go into a cave and meditate. That did not happen. He was there at all times. People were coming and going, asking questions. Animals were coming and going, and they all got his attention. Suddenly, the idea of just being in his presence calmed her down. She says, until then, every time she reached a destination, her mind will start saying, okay, where are you going to go next? Where are you going to go next? But for the first time, she comes to Bhagwan's presence, and she feels, oh no, I don't need to move. I need to steep myself here and try to understand what he is saying, because this is where I'm going. That conviction is already set in. There was a sense of urgency about all this because of the war. Because of the war, her idea of the world was so warped. She could not see world beyond violence outside wherever she has traveled. And she has seen all the tragedies that had happened because of colonialism. So when she came here, she saw people going about their daily life and doing what they were supposed to be doing, not thinking about what's going on around the world and letting it affect them. So her favorite spots were Palakuttu, that's where these pictures were taken, and I think Bhagavan has posed for her so beautifully. And I'm going to show the next picture. That's going to be so much. Look at that. Bhagavan is at the, he's reading something that in the post office of ashram, and you can actually see Ella walking by and saying, Bhagavan, can I take a picture? Can you turn? And immediately he obliged. And so around this time, this is 1943, I think in February of 1943, the book that she wrote an autobiographical book about all her challenges and everything. And that book came out, that's Cruises and Caravan. And she took that book and gave it to Bhagavan and said, you help me write this, and here's your first copy. And she also mentioned that she was very embarrassed because it was all about traveling. And she said, I hope all this traveling is coming to an end and I will make quick progress in my spiritual quest. That was the letter that she gave to Bhagavan. Now, in the later version, they translated in French, and she has included an exclusive about the stay in the southern part of India, particularly in Ramana. And that translation alone was translated by Marie Tonnerre. And I am going to read that. This is such a beautiful. So the book was published in 1943. The translation was published only in 1951. So you can see, when we read this, we understand what the stay in Ramanashram did to her. So this is what she says. The world attracts us by its marvels and its adorable beauty, even before we start to feel that indeed it has a hidden meaning. We begin to study it, we go off to conquer it, looking for whatever satisfaction it could bring to our deepest desires. But none of the multiple aspects of the world can give us the fundamental answer. That can only come from God. And where else is God other than within us? Everyone has to discover this fundamental truth on their own. The spiritual being hidden within us is the living source of our deepest aspirations. And those aspirations will never be fulfilled unless the deeper being is liberated. India, for me, was the beginning of a completely new voyage that would lead me to the full and harmonious life that I was instinctively looking for. To undertake this journey, first I had to understand the unknown lands of my own spirit, cruises and caravans. So, this is the introduction she intended to give in her first book. She did not in the very first edition. Okay, so her quest about the fundamental truth of life was deepening. And there are many instances where she actually had conversations with Bhagavan. And Bhagavan was very clear. We rarely get to see, we see biographies, we see autobiographies and memories, but I think this is the first time we actually see into a manuscript that was not written for public view. But it is, that is why the thing is so intriguing, because she writes about all her interpretation. We get to read some of the deep interpretation of what she gleaned from Bhagavan. So there is one instance where all her life she has heard, the kingdom of God is within you. She grew up in in a Christian environment, and she has heard that many times. The kingdom of God is within you. But she never got an answer of what exactly those lines meant. She says, if somebody had actually explained that to me, I wouldn't have spent so many years traveling. That is how she felt with that. It's very akin to Chadwick's statement too. Chadwick had this, Major Chadwick also had the same conflict. What exactly is crucifixion and what exactly is resurrection? That was a very conflicting thing that he had in his mind. And Bhagavan, in the very first day, I think, the very first day he came, Bhagavan is explaining that. So, in a way, both of them had certain pointed questions, and they just needed that little help from Bhagavan to make them look through the glass clearly. Now, the next picture, these two pictures are also very interesting. That picture of Mudalayar Party, I have never seen it before, and this must be one of the last pictures of Mudalayar Party too, because this is in 1942. Now, along with these, we noticed that she spent 2 hours meditating or staying in the hall, and in the morning and afternoon. The rest of the time, she was out in the town, and she was getting an immersive experience of all that was happening. The reason I put these two here was, earlier in her travel days, she says, I was traveling everywhere looking for differences in people, how different people approach life differently. She says, when I came to India, after imbibing a little bit of Bhagavan's teaching, I started to see the common thread that connects everybody. So she could relate to Mudalayar Party, she could relate to HMR Party, because all of them, they may all have different struggles, but they are all there for the exact same reason of finding peace. And I'm going to read from her writing because it is so beautifully written. She writes, thus I feel that all beings can blossom as soon as they have exhausted their innate peculiarity. Creatures tormented by our own contradictions, we must untie the skein that is in us, overcome our anguish, our cowardice, our courage, and our love for the limited or single being, to be able to release the fundamental note, this silent sound to which all diversities, all differences that we believe separates us, and to which nevertheless everything is actually reduced. This is the fundamental note. Bhagavan says, Manigalil Charadana Madantorunam. So it is the same thread that connects all of us. And she experienced it in that diverse environment. And finally it clicked. It said, I am not looking for multiplicity, I am actually looking for unity. Now, quickly, we're going to go through the rest of the slides. Okay. Now, that stone carver slide. We all know that the Bhagavan's shrine, the temple was built, but we don't have any pictures of that. And this picture was such a beautiful image of the stone carving happening. Now, looking at that stone carving, she actually had an experience. So she goes and complains to Bhagavan and says, this self-inquiry is so hard because every time I ask, I only get more thoughts and it gets more, muddled. And Bhagavan says you have to persist. It's the persistence that is going to get you to the final answer, right? And she watches the stone carver hit that granite with a small hammer. The chisel is heated and placed on the granite, and then he hits it with a hammer. And she says, every time he hits the thing, it gets deeper. So the heat of the chisel is the grace of a guru, and the hitting is the sadhana. And with time and grace, the depth of our inquiry deepens. And this is how she interprets this whole scene for herself. The other thing she interprets from here is also the grace is flowing like rain. But for a flat rock, the rain is just going to fall and run off. But if there is a way we make our inquiry and we deepen ours by putting a hole in that rock, the water will actually seep in. So again, when she heard Bhagavan say, grace is always there, you are the one who is standing in the middle, that's how she interpreted with that picture. Okay. So that's Samudram Lake. This is where she spent a lot of time writing and getting her ideas together. She was not writing for writing's sake by this time. She was writing basically to make herself understand what she was trying to understand. Some of them are real lamentation. It is something like, if anybody's read Bhakta Bhagavat's lamentation about why he needs to build a temple, it's very similar. There is one in which she says, I'm fighting so hard to surrender, but what do I surrender? What is it that I have to surrender? And this ego is so big that I'm unable to understand how to surrender. That I cannot possibly read the whole thing. So, yes. Now, the power of satsanga. So, here is a lady who comes in. She is very sincere and she is very quick to, I think this is all Bhagavan's grace. He pairs people perfectly. Now, Raja Iyer, the first person, he is the one. These are all people who could converse to her. So that's how they kind of gravitated toward, she gravitated towards them. Raja Iyer, we all know, speaks excellent English. So he was able to help her understand the day-to-day life of the ashram. And next one is Vishwanatha Swami. He has always been that perfect teacher who will give the correct book to the correct person. You see in many people's reminiscence that he has this telepathic view of what the person needs and gives exactly that. So Vishwanatha Swami, and of course Major Chadwick, he treated her probably like his daughter, and they used to share war stories, to talk about war and what's going on in the world. And that's his chair. She actually writes to her mom. She says, I love going to Chadwick's house because he lets me sit in his armchair. So there is such innocence and earnesty in her writing. I'm not doing any justice. I think I'm representing her extremely poorly. I would strongly urge all of y'all to, if you're not familiar with her works, please read it. And Kunju Swami, I think, was the one who took her everywhere. Okay, Bhagavan would never have let her go everywhere, especially to the mountain peaks by herself. So he would have said, Kunju, go with her. And that's how they became friends. Now she came in November, and what fantastic festive season she would have entered at that time. So beautiful pictures, again, female photographer, so please, we have to hoist this flag for her, amazing pictures. And every time we think about photography, we always think about TMK, we talk about the Wellington bus. It's about time to talk about Ella's stuff. And that picture, especially the one about the chariot, that is such a, that's how they stopped the chariot in the middle of the road. I have never seen a picture of that little stone being put under the wheel. And has anybody seen that? It's an amazing picture. And then here you go. This is Cow Lakshmi and her newborn coming into the ashram. So she was right there in the ashram, taking it all in and making good memories for us. Now I have to skip a few things. Can't. This one is important. Okay. So she talks about Bhagavan's presence. I am going to, this is from her unpublished works. This got published, but not when she was alive. But it was her work and she had written it for publication. So what happens in Bhagavan's presence? Something intangible emanates from such realized men. The odor of saints, just like it's there in Ramana Stuti Panchaka, right? The odor of saints. It sanctifies and permeates the land that they inhabit. Whatever happens, good or bad, in the daily life of these men, everything seems to be in order because the sage is there. It does not mean he was fully understood, but in those who had lived near him, grew the conviction that here was a man who knew what he was talking about and who knew why and how of what was harassing them. They stopped worrying about problems that they were never meant to solve. They resumed their daily tasks and they felt for the first time at peace. And I think in all these years, in the distance of time, every one of us feel that every time we look at Bhagavan's picture. So she is written an immortal verse right there. Now, a short thing about Tifus. The cat that she's holding is the cat from Monica, what's her name? Sujata Sen. Sujata Sen's cat. She inherited the cat, she kept it safe. And the reason Louis Thompson is there is because he was a very good friend of Ella, and he helped her edit some of the books that she wrote, and she dedicated this book to him because he had passed on by the time this book was released. And that, I think, is the only picture of Bhagavan with a cat, so I thought we should, for any cat lovers here. So, the time did, the war did come to an end, and in between she had this urge to go. In 1943, her mom was sick. She went and asked Bhagavan, "Can I go?" And Bhagavan very clearly, did not want her to go because the war was going on. And in 1945, in February, she finally left. And by the time she had this conviction that Bhagavan is always going to be with her. And she went back to Geneva and took care of her mom. And then she moved to a hill, a cabin on a hill. And she built that and she named it Achala. You can just circle that thing right there. Achala means something that's unmoving. So for a person who made a living moving all over the world, she named her cabin Achala. And she also wrote something very poignant. She said, my life does involve a lot of traveling, but I found out that there is an unmoving part in me. I have found, my needle has found the true north. The compass might be moving, the ship might be moving, but the needle is immovable and it is right there, pointing to the true north. and that is exactly how she felt. She many times she mentioned about spending hours in silence and sun up in the mountain. She continued to travel because her life demanded it, because everybody saw her as a trailblazing explorer. So they all wanted her guidance to travel all over the world, especially Tibet and Nepal. And in 1983, she did bring a big crowd of people back to Shri Ramana ashram. And towards the end of her life, I would say from the 80s onwards, even if she was traveling for work, she would always talk to them about who am I, and try to kind of blend in her spiritual life and her personal life in a very overt way, in a very public way. Now, in her, give me a second, I forgot it. So she was out here, so that is her in her cabin, and in that Achala cabin. And she writes, in that, there are a couple of things that I would like to read out. One is this. This is towards in her 80s, and she is living by herself, and she says, I live by myself, but I'm never lonely. And this is the transition where she knows that she has seen Bhagavan. Now she has seen Bhagavan outside, and through the sadhana she is starting to see Bhagavan inside, and that conviction shows through her writing. Now that I explore a world of spirit, eternally real, all becomes different. I am, have ever been, and shall always be. All is mine, mine is all. Therefore, I can never feel lonely. Such glimpses are still mainly thoughts, but one eventually becomes what one focuses on. I no longer feel the need to go to any Shangri-La to meet some mysterious Lama to tell me all about life. I have it here with me, in me, all the time. And so this was in her final days, and she finishes this memoir that she wrote for not publication, that she's grateful for everything that happened. She says, I come back to you, perfect pond of you, deep blue line of the far horizon. You sent me away to the seas and to beyond the seas in search of your promise. I have done it. I regret nothing. I feel all is granted. I have no more wish. I am free from myself. I don't belong to myself anymore. What then is my harvest? Nothing. That necessary oneness is the total mystery. But I learned the way to do it, and I kneel before it. This I think is the real deal. To learn to do a sadhana, and then to be completely immersed in it, and say that you are grateful for that experience, is what he says. You can go far. It's not how far we go, but what we bring back home. And what we bring back home in this sense means how much of that teaching you actually truly grasp and hold on. So she never talked about her spiritual life to anybody, but there was a caretaker called Anne who lived with her in the last few years. And she says, she wrote a memoir about Ella. It's called Cher Elle, and means Dear Ella. And she says, there was not a single day when she did not talk about Bhagavan the last few months. Every day she will talk about Ramanashram. She will talk about how the gaze was. And so Anne was intrigued because she's never been to India. She probably never going to visit Ramana Ashram, but she was amazed at what truly has happened to Ella. This is what she says. The true master is one who accomplishes the transformation of a disciple without the latter being aware of it, allowing them to realize the unity without effort, without combat, and without service. True master is the philosopher's stone that transmutes the copper of others. By this alchemy, they change copper into gold. And that's the kind of guru we all have. Thank you very much.